Hey, SE Historian here, and today I have a very special conversation I had with Frost Giant CEO Tim Morten. This was recorded months ago when I visited the Frost Giant Studios office, but contained information that has only started to become public more recently. Tim and I discussed some of the mechanical building blocks of Stormgate, lowering the skill floor for new players, and more. If you've been enjoying my work, be sure to get subscribed, leave a like, and drop a comment down below. That said, let's hear from the man himself, Tim Morten.
So I had the opportunity to play a very early sort of alpha version of Stormgate. Number one, I think there's some amazing ideas there right away. Like that was very apparent to me early on. How did you come to the decision to sort of build in those, I don't know what to call them, like auto macros for creating buildings and creating units and having everything be consolidated?
We've been thinking a lot about what's the experience for new players coming into RTS for the first time. And there's a bunch of other stuff around just getting them oriented with RTS as a genre. But one of the things that stood out as an opportunity for a quality of life improvement was to simplify the way that they build things. As you know, as a veteran Blizzard RTS player, clicking on units is kind of second nature to us because we played RTS games forever. But for a new player coming in, that's not a mechanic that they've seen from other games. And there's an opportunity for us to simplify that by simply saying, here's a list of the things that you can build that are buildings, or a list of the things that you can build are units. Click the thing that you want to build, and click the place that you want to build it if it's a structure, and we can select the best worker for you, or we can select the appropriate building for you if it's a unit. There's still an opportunity for players who are used to doing the things the way that we are to click on a unit. There's still an opportunity for high skill players to be deliberate about which unit they want to select to do things. So it's not taking anything away. It's just an example of lowering the skill floor, is something we talk about a lot, where players who are new and are coming in don't have to learn a thing straight out of the gate.
Yeah, it seems incredibly important because I tried to get so many people to play StarCraft over the years, and I think this is a very common experience with other RTS players. It takes a certain type of person to be willing to approach something that is just a steep learning curve and to be willing to fail so much. And so having something that makes it easier for you to get into the meat and potatoes of the game and actually start playing, I think that is the key to attracting like a more mainstream audience than most previous RTS games. Another one of the really interesting sort of design choices that I saw was this idea of resources not being finite with a particular geyser like it is within like StarCraft 2 or other games. So there seems, from what I understand, there's a bit of a variance in growth that happens with some of the resources. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and I'll caveat this by saying that we're still experimenting, but that currently one of the resources does expand, and left unmined, there are some benefits in terms of the efficiency that you get when you then later do mine it. But yeah, these are, I think you can see threads of influence from Command and Conquer, and some new ideas kind of all mixed in together. And we'll see where we actually settle, because I think there are some downstream repercussions of that to gameplay that are impactful, that we need to really evaluate. But so far we're enjoying the way it plays, and hopefully you did as well.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool concept. One thing I was theorizing is like whether or not the resource has to be in vision of a player for it to be growing, or will they all be growing passively on the map? I think there's a lot of different interesting avenues that sort of mechanic can go. Rolling back actually to those sort of global input mechanics, it feels sort of reminiscent of Zerg, right? Which is great, because I think Zerg was always the most efficient sort of race to play. Everything's consolidated. It makes more sense, and you flow through the tech tree. a little more naturally. And I think that's what this sort of can lead to as well. Was that something that was considered?
In terms of consciously being inspired by Zerg, I guess. I think it's fair to say that had some influence, but also just us kind of taking a look at what are the stumbling points in a first-time user experience for somebody coming into an RTS. And there are some other things that we're going to try to address with user onboarding, like just the amount of user interface that an RTS game presents at the outset can be intimidating to players, and trying to, if players self-identify as being new, trying to spoon feed a little bit more and not hit them with everything all at once. But again, as we get to just quality of life stuff, taking away something that we have to teach them, taking away the need to tutorialize, clicking on units before you do things, it's one less thing for people to worry about. And I do think it's possible to take automation too far. Like I think if you delete macro altogether, like you wind up with a different kind of game, even if some of the actions that you do during macro are repetitive. It's almost its own rhythm game to a certain extent. And you risk losing something there. Doesn't mean that for a new player there aren't opportunities to simplify and then reintroduce the complexity, but I think we're trying to really be conscious and careful about not deleting things from RTS that are such fundamental parts of what makes the genre great.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Like getting the fundamentals to seem intuitive, so that a new player can actually have resources, can actually have, build an army with relative speed, but leaving room for there to be lots of optimizations so that you can, there is going to be a 30, 40, 50% difference in economy in army size between the best players and the new players, as it should be, right? Like you can't have an incredibly high level of competition if there's not an incredibly high skill cap. But that doesn't mean that you can't design the game in such a way that new players aren't super frustrated, because that seems to be the experience a lot of times.
Yeah, I hope that we succeed in delivering on this the way that we want to, but really, most new players are coming into RTS absent the context of a game where they are more than one unit. Like most games, you have one representation of yourself in the game world. Typical RTS game, you don't even have a specific representation of you in that world. So yeah, it's just very disorienting for people who are coming from platformers or shooters to start an RTS game, and there's no representation of them. The input works differently. There's this fog of war that's hiding things that they often scroll off into and don't know how to get back to the correct area on the map. Like there's just so much about that first time that you play an RTS that risks turning people off and just being like, I don't understand this, I'm going away. So the thought process for us, there are so many things that go into making that experience of learning RTS better and not overwhelming, not as intimidating, and still make you appreciate the things that are so wonderful about RTS.
For sure. One thing I've thought about is, or I guess that one question I have is, have you considered a sort of on-screen like build order sort of suggestions and sort of early game, not a list of instructions, but like something to help people understand what they're supposed to be doing. Like for example in Dota 2, right, where you have some first party but mostly community driven build guides. Is that something that you think could make its way into the game?
There were some great, obviously, community-driven build guides for StarCraft as well. Yeah, I think build order training is a really interesting subject because there are two phases to somebody learning a game. And the first phase is getting from 0 to basic competency. And then that second phase is getting from basic competency to mastery. And I think build orders tends to fall more in that second bucket of like good to great rather than how do I play this game at all. I think there's a huge opportunity for learning tools about getting from good to great. I think for the game of chess, for example, chess.com kind of pioneered a variety of, there are AI trainers, there are, opening move trainers are sort of the equivalent of build order trainers for an RTS. So there's a lot of other sources of inspiration that we're kind of looking to for that good to great phase, separate from the just how do I onboard, how do I learn the basics.
Another element of the game I really sort of enjoyed that felt reminiscent of Brood War and Warcraft to a certain extent was the slower pacing of battles, which I actually really enjoy. I think it opens up a much larger opportunity for micro and for strategic decisions during the battle. Was that really the intention when designing the way that fights would play out?
There was a conscious decision to kind of turn the knob and adjust to land somewhere between where StarCraft 2 was and Warcraft 3 was in terms of unit durability and just duration of battle. Hopefully the point that we're at now does feel good. I have a feeling we'll keep tuning that all the way up to release. It's definitely not as slow-paced and sort of small unit count as Warcraft 3, but it is slower-paced battle versus StarCraft 2. The unit counts are fairly similar, but I think the pacing definitely feels different. So it makes me happy that came across to you as you played it.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt that way. I don't remember the names of the units, but I was engaging with some of the introductory melee units with the swords. Yeah. And then in addition to that, the sort of like first tier vehicle that fires the rockets. What's is there a name for that piece?
What's our final name on it? Hedgehog.
Hedgehog, okay. Right? Yeah.
We've only just assigned unit names recently, so we may want to.
Makes sense. Yeah. Of course. Again, everything's super preliminary, so nothing that we're discussing is sort of nailed down. But yeah, I mean, even just with like a simple engagement like that, where I was playing that mirror matchup that's set up there. There was so much micro potential, and there was a lot of fun. I really felt like because the duration of the battle went longer, it left me a lot of time to gain advantages and sort of optimize the way that the battle sort of played out. When units die super quickly, you lose that a little bit, right? Things show up, they die instantly, and then the fight is over. So if you weren't perfect in the first couple seconds, you lost. And this leaves a lot of room for comeback potential, especially obviously with more complex units that will allow you to take very specific strategic advantages.
Yeah, we certainly got feedback on StarCraft 2 that entire armies could get destroyed very quickly, and that there were players who felt like it would be desirable to have more durability, have longer engagements. So it is a balancing act of making sure that we do strike the right balance between speed of combat and we don't want to protract the games. We don't want to make it impossible or frustrating for players while they're in combat. But at the same time, this does give a little more opportunity for, as you're suggesting, reaction. And hopefully, as we go through the external testing periods, we get a lot of feedback on this and get to tune it up.
From what I understand, Defender's Advantage seems to be an important sort of part of game design for you. And I really like that design philosophy, especially when paired with the ability to gain advantages out on the map. So you're really rewarded for not only expanding quickly, but for fighting creeps and stuff like that. How are you going to sort of balance Defender's Advantage being very strong and the inability to sort of deal economic damage to people?
Yeah, this is a frequent balance topic as we're crafting each of the races, because there are differences mechanically in Defender's Advantage for each of the races. But yeah, ultimately it does just come down to value tuning for us, and again, getting feedback as we go through the testing phases. So we start with something that we've play tested as a team that we believe feels good, and then we get the external feedback. We get to watch a lot of those matches and just see how our ideas held up in practice.
So as far as Defender's Advantage goes, I think it was done really well in things like Warcraft 3, in addition to like MOBA games like Dota and League of Legends, where in the early game, it's suicide to go into the enemy base. But as your character gets stronger and your army, like obviously in RTS, becomes more sophisticated, it's not as much of a threat. Do you think that's the sort of balance you guys are sort of going for, where it's quite a significant defender's advantage in the early game, but that can be mitigated by having a large force, in the later stages of the game?
Yeah, I'm even thinking about, just my own play sessions with Stormgate recently that, things like in the current build, and this is all subject to change as we progress through external testing, but in the current build, you start with a scout unit, and that not only gives you a certain amount of exploratory capability, it also gives you a certain amount of defensive capability because you've got that unit out. But I also think, durability of structures, even just uncertainty around start location of the other. Like, there are so many things that go into how possible it is to take advantage of rest strategies or cheese strategies out of the gate. And this, of course, ties implicitly to Defender's Advantage. So I have a feeling we'll keep tuning as we go, but it feels pretty good to me right now, at least for whatever the current game state's worth.
Yeah, no, it seems like a lot of progress has been made in not a lot of time. When you look at other games of this scale, there's years and years of development that go in before anybody sees anything. And I think the fact that you guys have been, confident enough to be releasing the type of stuff that you have this early on is really indicative of the quality of the talent and the direction that the game's heading seems, really positive. And that's funny to me, because a lot of people, in response to some of the, public showings of what you guys have generated so far, have been like, I was expecting maybe something more, but it's like, no, this is so early, like in the development stage, in terms of everything, in terms of unit design and sprites and everything of that nature. And if you compare it to the pre-alpha, stages from StarCraft 2 or any other game, it's like, oh no, there's light years of improvement that have been made here already, and obviously things need to just be fine-tuned.
It's great to hear. So thank you for saying that. But I think part of the learning that we got on Star 2 was the importance of getting feedback early and really having the benefit of that feedback to help steer our decision-making process. It's scary to show stuff publicly because there's always a tendency to try to review that work as if it's a finished game, as opposed to something that's still very much in active development. But I think that's outweighed by the benefit that we get from players trying stuff that just, we're maybe too set in our ways as players here, but it's just, it's a much smaller sample set if it's just the team that's playing. And definitely over my time on StarCraft 2 at Blizzard, I think there was a shift from the mentality of trying to keep everything behind closed doors until very late in development, to trying to incorporate more and more player feedback. And we're trying to embrace that lesson at Frost Giant and trying to be as open as we can be about what we're building, about the state that it's in right now, so that we can get those inputs that steer our decision-making process.
Well, I think that about does it. So, once again, thank you so much for your time, Tim. Awesome. It was great talking to you. It was really fun discussing the game itself, more specifically, and I'm really looking forward to what the next stages of development are going to look like.
Well, thank you. Yeah, really grateful to have a chance to meet you in person.
Absolutely, you as well.
Thanks so much for watching. If you don't want to miss out on future releases like this, be sure to get subscribed. If you really enjoyed this one, leave a like, comment down below, and consider sharing it with some friends. Until next time.